Welcome to the third installment of this tutorial. Thanks everyone for sticking in there, and in this section we will be going over how to instantiate our prefabs in the scene so we can toggle between them and finally make our selection. So back in Visual Studios we need to write some code which will allow us to instantiate the correct prefab for our players to see. For this I'm going to go ahead and create a new method. I'm going to call it instantiate selection. And this is where we would link up the integer we've been working with to manipulate the array we stored our prefabs in. So let's go ahead and call instantiate, and we want to pass our array of game objects as the first argument. And the index is going to be, you guessed it, that integer value we have been updating with the buttons, which we created in previous videos. For the second argument, we want to pass through our empty selection game objects transform, since it's going to be the parent of the instantiated prefab. We want to call the method we just created when pressing the buttons so we can toggle through the prefabs. So go ahead and call it at the end of the previous and next button methods. Now we're going to go ahead and do some testing, so bear with me here while I set this up, and then when you're ready just jump back into Unity and hit the play button. In Unity, I'm just going to go ahead and press the previous and next buttons over and over again to see what happens. And the good news is that we are indeed instantiating the prefabs by pressing the buttons, and we're accessing the elements in the array. However, as you can see, they're not instantiating at the correct position, and there seems to be an offset, and they're falling because of their rigid bodies. This is a good thing for demonstration purposes because it allows us to cover disabling then enabling components for when we actually need them. As you can see, there's a few things that need to be corrected, starting with the position being at a place. So looking back at the prefab, there is a position set on the transform, so this might be what's giving me problems. I'm not sure how it is for everyone watching, so I'm just gonna stop the gravity from affecting us as well. That way we can focus on the position for now. So in the start function, just use a for each loop and loop through the array, then set use gravity for each element to false for now. And to do that, just call for each, and we want to use game objects since we have an array of game objects. I'm just going to use I, but feel free to use anything you like. And of course it's going to be in our array of selectable characters. Now disabling the gravity, we want to make sure to use the get rigid body component like so. It's going to be I.getComponent rigid body, then .use gravity, and set that to false. Now for some reason my progress didn't save, so I'll just rewrite the instantiate method. But this time I'm going to set instantiate in world space to false when calling instantiate to see where we instantiate at now. And I'm just going to go ahead and call it in start for right now. When it's working as intended, I'll go ahead and place it back in the button methods. Hopefully we're closer to where we want to be, so I'm going to go ahead and jump in Unity. After hitting play, we're no longer falling, which is good, but now we're off to the right for some reason. At least I am on my end, so chances are it's because the position that's saved from the prefab is being used. So this is going to be a good time to visit positioning game objects within code, so we avoid this no matter what. I'm going to rewrite the instantiate method so we take into account whether or not the parent object is holding one of our prefabs. To figure this out, we want to know if the child count of the parent is greater than 0, meaning there is a prefab already there and we don't want more than 1, so we're going to eliminate the 1 there and replace it with a new selection. That's going to be if the selected display object .transform .child count is greater than 0, we're going to destroy the child at position 0. In the else block, I'm going to call instantiate. However, the way I'm going to instantiate this time is different than the way I initially did it. We're going to create a game object from the prefabs array by calling instantiate when initializing a new game object created in code. That's going to be game object. I'm naming it player selection, and then equals instantiate, then pass through the array like before with the integer value. But this time we're not going to assign the parent using instantiate. You can give it a name that will show up in the hierarchy if you'd like. I'm calling it player character selection. Then from there, I'm assigning it a parent by calling transform.setParent and passing along the empty selection display game object's transform. And we're still off, but that's good because we have more control in code now. Manually filling in zeros for the position, you can see what I'm aiming for here. That's right in the center where the shadow gets displayed on the background. We want to set the local position, and that's going to be player selection.transform.local position. So remember, there's global and local, and for this case we want the local position. The quickest way to zero it out is setting it to a vector 3.0, which pretty much is a shorthand way of writing new vector 3 and passing zeros for the x, y, and z. So let's cross our fingers and test and see what happens. And what do you know, it's perfectly centered. Sorry about all the steps taking, but I wanted a real hands-on way to cover different approaches of instantiation. This by far is my preferred way because you can change so many things about a game object on the fly. Think about a projectile and giving it different random speeds each time it's instantiated or something along those lines. Anyhow, let's finish up the toggling aspect of our method here. Let's start by destroying the old selection before displaying the new one. Just call destroy and pass through selection display object .transform .getChild at position 0 .transform .game object. Make sure you get the actual game object, or else Unity will throw an error because this argument is expecting a game object. And you can see we're toggling through every other one now. So we're closer, but not there yet. Back in the instantiate character method, I'm going to copy over the logic for instantiating a prefab to the if statement that checks the child count to make sure instantiate happens every time after destroyed is called. And you know what? I can actually get rid of the else statement altogether because we're always going to instantiate, and just keep the child count check there before instantiation occurs. Just going to leave myself a little note, and this should work. And voila! It works in both directions. As you can see, we're going through our array of prefabs in the order we drop them in. So this is the fruits of our labor working as intended. As you can see, it's coming together, and in the next one we're going to bring the selected prefab into another scene with the start button, which is supposed to represent a game level. So we're going from character selection menu to the first level essentially. Thanks everyone for sticking in there, and I hope to catch you in the next one, which should be the last one for this.